ASMR channel.
For all the ASMR content you didn't ask for, and for all the Ryan Murphy content that you didn't ask for.
And you, don't want.
Don't want. Well...
And honestly, neither do we.
Today, my girlfriend Rhiannon and I are here, and I think this has been a mission of purpose for a while now, because Rhiannon and I have been watching a little television show, a small program you might be familiar with called American Horror Story. And at a certain point, this became an exercise in complete masochism, like 100% human suffering. And we needed meaning to that suffering. We needed to find something out of it, because otherwise it would have been pointless. It made me, like, it was me at my most nihilistic. I was just staring at myself in the mirror like, is this how it ends? Is this how we go on this planet, on this rock, surrounded by garbage? But, so yeah, American Horror Story. I think it's interesting that we're going to talk about this because it is one of the most popular and one of the longest running pop horror phenomenons in mainstream media right now. Which is interesting because when's the last time you, like, heard somebody, like, talk about mentioning it?
American Horror Story?
Yeah.
Literally 2 days ago.
Well, I mean, like, I mean, like, outside of our sphere. Like, to me, it's kind of like, I see...
Oh, no, one of my friends from work mentioned it.
Oh, okay.
Actually brought it up because she, went on a trip.
Well, tell her that she ruined my point. I see them, though, as being congruent with another popular horror series, that being The Walking Dead, where for the first 4 seasons, it was basically inescapable. Like, when people still had cable TV, I remember seeing previews for both of these shows on there. They were both more adult-oriented. They were both from people who had been popular showrunners for previous things, and this phenomenon sort of just caught on. And now it is something that is simultaneously still popular enough to exist, but not something that you still feel like... I don't really remember the last time anyone was just like, oh yeah, I'm really still keeping up with this. It's sort of lost in the minutiae of Netflix and Hulu and streaming and all of that. So we decided to watch it, and we have thoughts. Just as a general little bit of overview, the showrunner and main creative minds behind American Horror Story are, one, Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk. If you've recognized those two names, it is because they were both of the people who were behind Glee.
Because you're all minorities. You're in the Glee Club.
Which is a funny
Shudders
story.
and PTSD.
A funny story in and of itself. I believe Glee actually started off as a movie script that the original author couldn't really get made, but ran into Ryan Murphy at the place where he went to the gym, and then Ryan Murphy pitched it as a show, and then it became what it was. And before that, Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk also worked on a show called Nip Tuck, about plastic surgeons. And then they did that, and then we have American Horror Story, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about every season. There are currently 10, I think. I think there are 10 seasons with, I think, one that's, like, just finished airing, I think.
I think so.
So we're going to talk about them in 3 season-long chunks for this little video. So we're going to talk about seasons 1, 2, and 3. And if you don't know anything about American Horror Story, each season is its own anthology. It's its own story that has connections sometimes to other things. Oh boy, will we have thoughts about that later. But the first 3 seasons are, respectively, Murder House, Asylum, and Coven. So, let's start off with American Horror Story, Murder House. I am not the expert here. Rhiannon is, because she was the one who said that, like, she liked the first season and had seen it a lot. And I was just like, I remember seeing bits and pieces of this, but I never, like, it was before my horror inception, so I never really paid much attention to it. So would you say, in, like, generally speaking, this is the most well-considered season of the show? By most people?
It's from what I've heard, it's typically Murder House or Coven.
Okay, that sounds.
Then you
about
have
right
the
to me.
freaks that like think that Freak Show and Hotel are the best, but we don't consider them as.
It was my Lhasa Apso who piddled on the kitchen floor, but they didn't believe me.
Murder is 1 part perspiration, 10 parts preparation.
His father was a drinker.
I was gonna say reasonable thinkers, but yeah, people works too.
Okay, and I think the immediate standout for me anyway with Murder House right off the bat was the cast. I didn't really expect it to be just so laden with talent that had, existed before this show, like Dylan McDermott, Connie Britton, mainstay Jessica Lange, who is in most of the seasons of the show.
Sarah Paulson.
Oh, Sarah Paulson she's in it, and also.
Oh yeah, I forgot that she doesn't show up in Murder House until later seasons.
Yes, and as well as the only actor to appear in every season, Evan Peters.
Yeah.
Yeah, Evan Peters. He's also in this. I think this is also the thing that's sort of like he was one of the few people. I think this is what he's known for. It's like this and like Quicksilver and X-Men.
Which is unfortunate because.
Woof.
He can act.
Yeah, he sure can.
He can be given nothing and act.
There's also Rooney Mara's sister, Kate Mara, who shows up. She was doing shows like House of Cards at times like this, I think. And then there's, I think the last famous person I haven't mentioned is Zachary Quinto. He was the only person I really recognized in it initially, back when it first aired. But what the hell is Murder House about? Broadly.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
How does one explain? Because it
This
it
is gonna
just
be
is.
a ride.
It just is, like the cool thing about these nifty little subtitles to each season is they explain exactly what it is.
Oh, that's true.
Although I believe, if I remember correctly, initially they didn't have those. Like it started as more of a fan
Designation.
title thing, where everyone kind of called it Murder House, even though that's not what it was initially. Essentially, I mean, it opens with I was gonna call her Nan, but that's Coven. What's her fucking name in this season?
Adelaide?
Addie, yeah. Addie.
Yeah, they call her Addie.
Basically opens with her telling everybody that they're gonna die in this house, and that's exactly what they do. On the base level, it's a house where not only is everyone gonna die, but once you die, you're stuck there forever.
Yeah, it's the whole sort of bit with it is that the new family moves into this house, and it's a spooky house, right? But it's it's the murder house, so it's like this multi-generational object. This is where we come back to sort of the Ryan Murphy ethos of horror, which is that number one, everything is The Shining. And by everything is The Shining, I mean everything
is The Shining.
is Murder House. Because basically he has like 1.5 ideas. The half idea is a decent idea, but we only see it twice. The entirety of the first idea is there is a place, and the souls of people are stuck to the place. That's what Murder House is, and it's a very pulp horror, Stephen King kind of presentation of like everybody moves in. It is very much like The Shining, but as each episode goes by, you learn a little bit more about each of the ghosts that you keep seeing in different little segments, and like you basically get a full like centuries long view at what has happened in this place. And it's also kind of Rosemary's Baby in the second half, which is not the only time the show is Rosemary's Baby. That also happened like 3 other times, but we're just gonna not think about that. So I think the most purveying theme in Murder House is sexuality the question mark. I mean, like, everybody's horny. Everybody.
Yeah.
The main ghost from it is the leather dude. Like, everybody knows, like, the dude who's dressed in leather, and he just kind of shows up, and it's like, oh, whoa.
Well, it's difficult to call him the leather dude because...
It's not leather, it's latex, I guess.
Yeah, but also multiple people are the latex dude.
Well, yes. I mean, it's like, but I feel like when people associate memories of this, that's what they, like, that's the monster that they think of. And his identity is sort of obscured for a while. And basically, I think the mainstays are we have the couple who's Connie Britton and Dylan McDermott and their daughter, who's played by Tessa Farmiga. And the main ghosts are the neighbor, who's played by Jessica Lange.
Well, yeah, Constance, but she's still alive.
Yes,
because Constance used to live in the murder house, and all of her kids died there for whatever reason.
And what's her name? Adelaide is one of them.
Yes, but she's still alive as well.
Yes.
And she dies outside of the house.
Yes. That is something that the show does not make entirely clear for a little while, is that you're kind of like, you kind of think she might be a ghost, but, you know, the show just doesn't really outright tell you until the show outright tells you. So it's got her kids. Evan Peters is also one of them. He plays Tate Langdon.
If you were on Tumblr in the early 2010s, you know who Tate Langdon is.
Evan Peters was very popular with the Tumblr girlies. I knew this without being on Tumblr. I just, like, saw his character and was like, hey, so was he, like, a really popular character on Tumblr? And then Rhiannon just looked at me with death in her eyes and was just like, I don't want to talk about it. So that told me... You good?
Great.
Okay. So, we have him, and immediately, the weird thing, the how to best go about this. It was really interesting seeing you react to this after having met me. Because the most aggressive thing about Murder House, and my biggest problem with it, is the fact that it is made horribly. Like, and I know that a lot of people don't necessarily give as much of a shit as me about this, but, and this is why I kind of have a theory as to why Murder House is the most popular one, and the one that's, like, the most enduring, in that I think the presentation and overall, like, jaggedness of everything is, like, so aggressive that it ends up being something that just kind of, like, mystifies people. Like, I think it kind of goes over their head, and then they're just like, whoa, this is so, like, weird and shit. And it's like, it ends up being, like, the presentation of this has, like, the worst part about it is the camera movement. And the editing. The cameras are, this went to the Kenneth Branagh Thor school of camera movements, where they're all tilted. Even in season 8, when they briefly revisit Murder House, they adopt the style of every angle being stilted all over again. And I think it's to, like, show you, like, oh, this house is weird and fucked up. But, like, the edits and the dialogue, like, they don't overlap properly. Sometimes there will just be, like, the quick cutting in this is really... I don't really remember all that much about Glee, but I don't think it was this incompetently made, so my theory...
I've never watched Glee sober, so I don't either.
Oh, really?
I can't watch it sober.
Oh, sober. I was just like, I thought you had watched Glee, and then I was just like, oh, yeah, that's right. But that said, I don't think that was a show that, like, you know, I'm sure that the formals of Glee are not exactly the most sterling silver or anything, but I don't think they were this bad, which is, like, I think that the show had a budget, because Ryan Murphy had never worked on something like this before, and was just like, hey, what if I made this horror show, because I have a lot of clout and I have a lot of money now, and everybody was like, I don't know, I mean, you can make it, but, you know, here's a nickel and a dime, and then, I also have for those of you who are very aware of online media criticism and whatnot, you'll know the name Michael Goy. Michael Goy is the director of the notoriously horrible film Megan is Missing. Michael Goy is one of the main camera operators and cinematographers in American Horror Story. And guess where he has the most credits? Season 1! So, watching this kind of made my head hurt. It's really bad in the first 3 episodes. It gets better. It gets noticeably better as it goes on, but it's rough. Like, even Rhi was bothered by it, and she had seen it multiple times.
That's the thing that just really kills me, is that in the past year that I've known you, I've learned so much that I would have never known. Like, I've watched Murder House. I've watched Murder House through Coven multiple times. But I've watched Murder House and never really noticed that there was anything wrong with the editing or anything. And then watching this, the one particular thing it did was it would have a shot going, and then it would just zoom in a little bit.
Oh, that was the worst thing ever. It's just every shot, boom, every shot, boom.
Like,
every
it just,
shot, boom.
and for no reason, sometimes it wouldn't do it, but it did it so often that you were just kind of sitting there waiting for it to do it again.
75% of the time.
And it is bad, and I never noticed
it's like
that
The
before.
Office. It's like when it does.
But it
that
doesn't
thing
zoom
where,
in that much.
Yeah, it just
it
does
only
a little
zooms
bit.
in a little bit.
And it's
And
maddening.
then it switches to a different shot. And then sometimes it'll do it again, and sometimes it'll stay still. And I never, ever fucking noticed that. To the point where for a while I was like, is there something wrong with Netflix right now? Or is it really just fucking doing this?
It's all my fault. What I've done. In all fairness, this is a problem that mostly goes away. But there's a weird quality that Murder House has where it's just like, it leaps between timelines, and it doesn't do it chronologically. It'll just, like, at one point in an episode, in a cold open, in an ending stinger, you'll just see something that happened in this house.
Yeah.
Or you'll see them, like, the after image of something like that. And
Yeah.
it's never clear about it, and this is simultaneously what makes watching it so frustrating, but also it makes me kind of see the grand design of this being, like, something that is... It's almost avant-garde. Like, I know that sounds pretentious, but its weird, disjointed presentation stops being a hindrance and kind of starts being this thing where it's just this tapestry of wonky shit that just kind of keeps going and going and going. And for the first half of the season, it never really, like, latches onto an idea. There's just shit happening. There's, like, some kids who, like, broke into the house a couple of decades ago, and there's, like, an episode that, like, reenacts, like, a home invasion with them, and I didn't really ever know what that was all about. And then there's, like, Dylan McDermott's mistress, who's Kate Mara, and then she's dead, and then they gotta bury her, and then Connie Britton's pregnant, and it's probably the latex man who we think is Zachary Quinto, but is probably not Zachary Quinto, and then ends up being Evan Peters. And then there's, like, a pseudo-romance with Evan Peters and Tessa Farmiga, which is really weird because you're immediately like, this kid, there's something wrong with this boy, because he's, like, sitting there and he's like, oh, he's one of the Dylan McDermott's patients. And then he's not, he's a ghost. He's a ghost in the house. And he's also a school shooter.
So say we're gonna elaborate on why he's a ghost?
Yeah, he's a school shooter, and then the FBI comes in and just... There's also a maid. And the maid, she's sometimes an old maid, and then sometimes she's like a 20-something hot redhead.
I love hearing you explain it like this.
And there's just like this one part that happens where I think it's after Kate Mara's dead, and then there's just like, they just cut, and it's just like the maid and Kate Mara are just like sitting there making out in their underwear on the couch, and then Dylan McDermott just, like, walks by them. And then Kate Mara's just like, I thought that you said that it would catch his attention.
And you're also forgetting the time in which the maid was almost the fucking remake of Black Dahlia.
Oh! Okay, this also is the .001 for one of my least favorite Ryan Murphy tropes, where he has to incorporate something that happened in real life into the show. Like a real life murder or murderer that they have to, like, the actual, when she says the Black Dahlia, she means the actual Black Dahlia canonically is involved with the plot of the show.
And I want to just take a moment right now, drop in the comments your guess on who it is in the second season, because you're not going to be able to guess. I promise.
That one is maybe the most outlandish. It's a little bit all downhill from there, but sometimes it's really
As
funny.
if there was ever an uphill.
No.
Season.
And like with the Black Dahlia too, there's something that's like, if you know anything about the Black Dahlia murder, it's a pretty grisly murder. I was kind of surprised at just how violent this shit gets, like, from the beginning, and then I'm just like, oh yeah, it's FX, that makes sense. But really, no holds barred is that there's just a lot of really gruesome shit, and it really doesn't scratch the surface. I think that, like, we're not going to talk about it in this episode, but, like, when it gets to shit like Roanoke, that shit's upsetting. Like, that's when it gets bad. Like, even for me, and I watched shit like Murders in high school, and I was just kind of like, this is a little much. Never quite that bad in Murder House. Once you kind of know the context for all these ghosts and what's going on, then the show actually does get a little bit interesting. I think the first real hook happens when when you find out that Tessa Farmiga is actually dead. That was the first thing that really caught me off guard, because I was like, I did not see that coming at all, and it's like a really, like, kind of shocking, upsetting thing that happens, and you're just like, oh god, that's awful.
That was rough.
Yeah,
That
and
one's upsetting.
Sarah Paulson shows up as a medium in, like, one episode?
Maybe 2?
We find out Jessica Lange killed the slutty maid because she was having sex with her husband, I think.
So
and
the
she shoots her in the eye, and that's why she has the glassy eye.
Yeah, so the thing also about the maid is that it's not that just sometimes she's 20 and sometimes she's old.
That's right.
She has, so the whole thing about the ghosts in the house is they get to choose who sees them and who sees them when.
A point that is not made until the very end of the season, which is really confusing.
And then once again in season 8. But anyway, the thing about the maid is that she has an actual name. Why are we just calling her the maid? Anyway.
I don't remember her name. There's so many names. There's so many characters in the show. I'm so confused. She's like one of the more popular...
Anyway, yeah. So the thing about her is that she gets to choose how she appears, because everyone here looks the same they did as when they died. Mm-hmm. Which, when she's young, that's how she looks. But personally, I want to believe it's because she has such a strong attachment to the real world and wanting to be with her mother, that her ghost also aged. So, like, to women and people...
You get her backstory of her pulling the plug on her mom because she was in the hospital.
Yeah. To women and to people that she, I guess...
People that aren't sexually attracted to her, she appears as an old maid. People who are sexually attracted to her, she appears as a hot 20-something.
Yeah.
And if you haven't guessed by now, this is a lot of melodrama. This is a lot of Stephen King, like, flashback tied to the supernatural thing. And it kind of, like, once the story kind of becomes about something is when Tessa Farmiga ends up dying and she's a ghost and finds out that she's a ghost. And also you figure out that the pregnancy is not, it's not Dylan McDermott's baby, and it's not Zachary Quinto's baby. And Zachary Quinto and his boyfriend were also a couple that lived there in the continuing saga of Ryan Murphy putting gay characters in his shows that feels simultaneously both inclusive and homophobic.
But they're only there for him to kill him anyway.
Yeah.
Every season without fail.
Like they show up and they're immediately the most sinister characters. Like they show up and you're just like, Zachary Quinto, you're like, that motherfucker is evil. I don't know what he did, but he's evil. And he kinda is, but like not really.
He's just evil in every season that he's in this show.
He's just an asshole. And then there's like, it all ties into like the Rosemary's Baby thing. It's like, oh, she's gonna have the baby, and like Dylan McDermott. It's like, it's really mostly about Dylan McDermott more than anything. Really, is that he starts off and it's like, and he's like jerking off and stuff. There's a lot of sex in this show. And he's like he's unfaithful, he's a deviant of some kind, and he's trying to change that. And I think the biggest problem too with the biggest problem with the first half of the season is that, yeah, it's really disjointed and all of like the editing's bad and the camera work and like all that. But like, when you try to get past that and look at the core of the story, he's just super unlikable. There's really nothing about him that you're like, oh, I want to root for this guy. It's just like, you're just kind of like, man, poor Connie Britton, this sucks for her.
Yeah, so the show initially opens with a couple different things, but when it comes to them, it's Vivian, or Connie Britton. She has gone through a miscarriage, and she comes home one day to find her husband sleeping with one of his students.
And that's Kate Mara?
That's Kate Mara.
Yeah.
Dude is a psychiatrist. And
the world's worst psychiatrist.
The fact that he hasn't lost his license by like episode 4 is upsetting.
He doesn't even notice that one of his patients is a ghost.
He doesn't even... I mean, at one point, he practically killed one of them.
Yeah.
But it's just everything he does is awful.
Yeah.
So the whole reason that they moved across the country to this crazy house was because they're trying to mend this relationship. We're going back to the Rosemary's Baby thing. As the show goes on and you get all these bits and pieces from the past, you find out kind of why it's putting that whole Rosemary's Baby thing into play, because the wife of the man who had the house built in the 20s, played by Lily Rabe, who is...
Lily Rabe is along with Evan Peters, and that she's one of the people in the show consistently who I will give a permanent pass to, because she's usually really great in it. And yeah, her and Evan Peters are both like standout performers acting wise. Like, I'd actually say Murder House is probably one of the stronger acted seasons. Peters is really good as Tate. Tessa is really good as, I don't remember her character's name.
Violet.
Yeah. Connie and Dylan are both good as the couple, and like, yeah, everybody across the board is just pretty good in their respective roles.
Yeah, so the couple that had the house built in the 20s, the man was what they called the doctor to the stars, which meant he performed abortions in their basement. So a poor girl would show up, hand Miss Lily Rabe a $20 bill, and go get an abortion. Come to find out, not only is their marriage broken and horrible, because that's just what happens in this house, but someone somehow found out what he was doing and had their baby kidnapped and killed. So the rest of her life and the rest of her like soul-searching eternity was to have a baby.
Children.
So she has kind of enlisted every single person that has lived in this house to get her a baby. And it's never panned out. The gay people were supposed to adopt a baby for her. Never happened. So once Vivian gets here and Tate starts using the rubber suit, he's able to get her
a baby.
The baby.
And I think it's sort of all presupposed with the idea of once they get the baby, they might be able to like move on. But like the implication here is that it's like the Overlook Hotel, and that all the bad things that happen here have congealed into this malevolent force that just kind of sucks them all inside. And that's kind of later retconned to be like the fact that it's actually like a vessel for like the devil. And then that's what, I think they describe it as like, it's not like the evil was in Tate, but the evil worked through Tate. I think is how they put it.
Yeah.
We keep referencing this. They come back to Murder House in season 8, and we'll get to that when we get to that. I actually think that's probably the best episode of the show.
Well, it's the highest ranked.
It is the highest ranked
of the show, like, ever.
And I have to agree. I do think that is the best front to back episode, just because it takes that's the thing about that episode that I really, really like, is that it's made decently well. And it doesn't have any of the problems of the first half. Is that all the ideas here, this on paper sounds like the most compelling season, and that's probably why people remember it. Is that a lot of it really does work. It's just that a lot of it too is that slapdash first half. I think for a lot of people was like, oh, this is intriguing. I want to find out more. For me as a viewer, I just find it really fucking frustrating. But I can easily see why this was the thing that lured people in, because it's weird. This is a really it's got this sexual edge, it's really violent, it's really weirdly formally made, and even though I think it's kind of incompetently made, it's still something that people notice and just wow, why is this show look like this? And it's I get it, I understand why this became a phenomenon from this, is because it's so oblique and odd. I just think that the construction of it is clumsy. And while I'm mixed on it overall, easily one of the best seasons.
We both have it ranked number 2 right now.
Yeah, we haven't finished season 8, but currently this is my second favorite. I would give Murder House I think I'd give it a 5 out of 10, just because the first half is so...
And yes, we do mean that something that would be a 5 out of 10 is the second best season of this show.
Thank you, exactly. Is that I like a lot of it in theory, and in some of it in concept, and I do think it fulfills a little bit of its potential. It has a really strong ending, because it manages to tie off, it manages to both emphasize the tragedy of a lot of the characters that are left there, but also give a conclusiveness to some of the other characters that you maybe wanted to see their stories ended. So you can easily see why, it kind of ties everything together well with those main central cast members. And then ends with like a really like big stinger of like, oh, what the fuck? But it's like, I'd give it a 5 out of 10 just because I think half of it is clumsy and half of it is decent, and it just kind of evens out in the end. But that said, I did really enjoy it. It's weird that like,
and
it was frustrating, but I did.
Another way to kind of put upon like why the murder house is the way that it is, I think it's later explained that the house was built on top of a portal to hell. Additionally, I don't think it's just Evan Peters or Tate that
there's also the
Force
Satanist
kind of moves through.
Yeah.
Because you have characters like Dylan McDermott who, once they move in, they somehow get worse.
Yeah, they emphasize
and there's also
their bad
the Larry
traits.
guy who set his whole family on fire because of the house.
That's right.
Like, it's just like this house latches on to men particularly, and
That's
kind
a
of
big
drills.
theme of Ryan Murphy's is that, like, I will give him credit, he's very much on the men are trash train.
Every season has that as a theme, at least once.
The only thing that sucks about it is that he's firmly on the men are trash train, but he also tends to give the women characters, just writes them really shallowly. Like, really, like, they just don't get the depth that the male characters have, and they seem like these put-upon angelic figures who just don't get the depth that they do, so it's like, you kind of did it, but also,
with the exception of Coven. But I still, to this day, Ryan Murphy, I'm looking at you, who the fuck wrote this season? Because it was not you.
We'll get there.
It was not him.
So, what would you give Murder House?
See, after seeing everything else that we have, not only that, and, like, having a connection to it before this, I want to give it a little bit higher.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'll give it a 6.
To be fair, I was probably a lot more negative on it before I saw the other seasons too. So that's, I think that'll be the first little ranking. Murder House, which is complicated, it's messy, it's got a lot of stuff. Comparatively, easily the easiest season to talk about. Because for all its weirdness...
Second easiest. Coven is going to be fun to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's because Coven, like, in my mind, Coven doesn't feel like it's a part of American Horror Story.
Yeah. We keep jumping to Coven because it's easily the best season that of anything Ryan Murphy is ever going to produce in his life.
And in sharp contrast, we have Asylum. After that. And getting through Asylum, like, how many bottles of wine did we collectively consume to get through this season? Because I'm pretty sure it was a good
It
many.
was a lot. The fun thing about Asylum is I say that I've watched Murder House through Coven a lot. I have only, prior to watching it with you, I have only made it through Asylum in its entirety one single fucking time.
It's really...
And I had to be forced by my friend to watch it.
It's really easy to see why. And, like... It's just... The whole gig with American Horror Story is the concept of, like, pulp horror. And, like, I'm a Stephen King person. That's obviously what a lot of this is taking from. I love that kind of shit. So, there are parts of this show that appeal to me just because they're, like... Okay, they're kind of trash. And of the seasons that I can unequivocally call bad, Asylum's probably my favorite of the bad seasons.
Not because it's better than them, but because you can at least, like, laugh and find some sort of enjoyment in it. It's not, like, super painful.
Murphy as a guy is, like, you know, not to paint him stereotypically, but, like, the dude made Glee. So I can pretty much confidently say the guy likes camp. And, you know, he's casting people like Kathy Bates and Jessica Lange, and they come in here and they have these really, really good, but still hammy performances. And Asylum really, really doubles up on the camp. To the point where I remember a character showing up in the opening credits scene of what's his character's name? The fucking Nazi. What the fuck is it with this wiki not including the most important characters? He's the guy from Babe, Pig in the City. He's the that'll do pig, that'll do. He's fucking that guy. Well, his name shows up in the credits, and I'm like, oh, he's in this season. He's a great actor. And then I just remember you looking at me and just being like, you're not gonna like him in this show. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't I like him? And then it's just like, oh, well, he's a Nazi. And
yeah.
So, like, the premise of Asylum is that...
Now that you've heard the word Nazi, do you want to come back to who your guess is for this season?
Let's build to that. Okay, So, Asylum is, again, this is a season of American Horror Story. It is about a big place and how all the people are stuck in the big place. And naturally, this is, a lot of the themes here are about people with mental illnesses. These are about women who aren't believed to have their specific mental ailments.
Gay people.
Gay people. Sarah Paulson finally showing up in full.
Miss Lana Banana.
Is Sarah Paulson ever in this show in any season straight?
I mean, there are a couple times when it's not canon that she's not straight, but she's
like,
not
yeah, okay.
ever
So,
straight.
but Sarah Paulson's sort of the de facto main character, and I also do need to start with the fact that the first thing that happens in this is like the asylum's all abandoned. It's like modern day, and two people break into it, and of course they break into it to have
But
sex.
who are
because
they?
What else? Well, one of them is Adam Levine of Maroon 5. And when that popped up, I was just like, man, Ryan Murphy really has a type. Because Adam Levine, Zachary Quinto, Dylan McDermott, Wes Bentley, all of these guys look exactly the same.
And the one that's in the recent episodes.
Yeah.
What's his fucking name?
Dermot Mulroney.
Yep.
All of them are the same. They all look like my dad. It pisses me off. It's just every season. There's always one. And they all play the exact same type of character, which...
Dr. Arden is the character's name, by the way.
So they, it's
James
like
Cromwell.
It's James Cromwell, thank you. It's like a framing device, too, is that Adam Levine shows up, and then there's like a serial killer there that tries to kill him, and he immediately gets his arm cut off, and then it shows you who the actual serial killer is, and then it's not the actual serial killer, and then the actual serial killer shows up and kills them, and this framing device means nothing. It doesn't tell you anything. It's just like, oh, eventually it's Dylan McDermott, and then it does the thing where he goes and sees Sarah Paulson, and you're just like, why was any of this set dressing necessary at all? But the vast majority of it takes place in the past, and it's kind of a split narrative between Evan Peters and Sarah Paulson. Sarah Paulson's like an investigative reporter, I think, and she's like trying to figure out like this asylum, which is run by these nuns, one of which is Jessica Lange and the other is Lily Rabe. And Evan Peters, who is like just this dude, and he's like got a wife, and then eventually like some question mark alien abduction shit happens.
So here's the thing, is that it's set in what, the fucking, what year?
50s, 60s?
40s, 50s maybe?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, Evan Peters is married to a black woman.
Yeah, so he
which,
gets...
as you know, back then was...
No.
So all the people in town have been harassing them for years, so they assume it to be something that they did. But from our end, it's like... abducted by fucking aliens?
Because they do this thing where it's like the fucking, like the lights come on, and you just like, it's like you're seeing a spaceship, but it's also like, is this guy just crazy and like going through electroshock therapy or something? Like, yeah. I pointed that out.
So, yeah, you said the electroshock therapy thing, and that kind of had me have like one of those galaxy brain moments where I was like, that is something that I've never considered. But...
And then you remember that you're smarter than Ryan Murphy is, because this idea does not get revisited at all.
It kind of does later, because someone else got abducted by... Like, the alien idea is revisited, but it's never fully confirmed that it's aliens, especially because at the very end of the season, he kills his entire family, which ends up being 2 women and, like, 4 kids.
He has... It's an Evan Peters polycule. It's so weird. Also, another thing is that Chloe Sevigny shows up in this season, and it's just like, he just gets occasionally like these weird, like, Oscar and art house actors to show up in his show, and I'm just kind of like, what? I mean, good, but also what? And she plays a nymphomaniac, I think, and who is one of the key characters I talked about is in terms of women not being written very well. She really gets the short end of the stick in this season. And what happens is that Sarah Paulson, who is also gay, you know, her and Evan Peters both have a situation where they're persecuted for who they're married to. They both get put in the asylum. One of, like, Sarah Paulson is because her girlfriend is
Well,
like.
no, Sarah Paulson got put there because Jessica Lange knew she was going to
Expose them.
expose the asylum, so she found out that she was gay and had her committed.
Yes. And the other, like, her partner can't get her out because that would compromise her and her job.
Because she's a school teacher.
But the first thing that happens is that she's murdered. Like, it happens, like, immediately after. By a serial killer who is, you know, the bloody face killer, which, like, really, that's the best name you could come up with. And you're just like, oh, who's this killer guy? And I would just like to point out that when it comes to the twists in these seasons, they're occasionally, there are ones that are just kind of unexpected, like Tessa Farmiga dying in the first season. I can see that coming. Then there's, like, some that are just so outlandish that you couldn't have possibly predicted them happening. And then there are the ones where a character will walk on screen, and I will instantly go, he's the bad guy. The second Zachary Quinto showed his face in the season, I was just like, he's the bloody face killer. It's him. It's him. He's gaslighting all his patients. Lo and behold! I'm right. And I think one of the reasons you didn't take to this younger is because this is another, like I was talking about how, like, violent and sexual the show is. This kind of doubles up on that. It's really unpleasant at times. Like, it's genuinely, like, there are just parts where you can't really get any camp enjoyment from it, and it's just, like, it is just raw human suffering. And you're just kind of like, I'm not having a great time, and this also isn't very well written, so I'm not really, like, compelled. I just feel gross. So that's, like, the biggest thing it's got going against it. And then, halfway through the season, something happens. And then the show doesn't get any better, but it gets a lot more enjoyable. So, Anne Frank shows up.
However, she's gaslit the entire time into not being Anne Frank.
Somehow, Anne Frank has returned. And, like, at first the show is doing a thing where it's just like, oh, she's not actually Anne Frank. She thinks she's Anne Frank. She's crazy.
She's mentally ill.
And then you see the flashbacks and the conflicting story, and it's just like, this woman's Anne Frank.
So every time they let her, like, every time you see one of the flashbacks that she's seeing, it's never a flashback. It's something that you're watching a TV screen instead of a TV screen.
Yeah, it's
as
fake.
if it's something that the, like, CIA has, like, turned into one of her memories. A whole, like, the Hunger Games Mockingjay type shit with PETA.
Yes.
Like, they're forcing her to be...
They have officially made Anne Frank into a psyop. And
then she sees...
Her husband's a CIA agent, but he's like, oh no, you're actually this woman, you're not Anne Frank. Stop doing this, blah, 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 blah. And then
he brings her to the mental asylum because he wants to get her fixed to make it to even gaslight her even further that she's not Anne Frank. She gets there and she sees Dr. Arden, who was a Nazi. Nazi war criminal that tried to kill her.
And she recognizes him.
And she goes batshit crazy. So they do a lobotomy to fix her.
Yeah, it's, this is the first time he goes into historical revisionism that I would say is offensive. And it's not like it offends me or anything, but it's just something that I can watch and recognize and be like, I just don't know how you don't immediately get that this is in poor taste. Like, I get that this is schlocky, I get that this is pulp horror, but also, like, the thing that really bothers me about it is they actually go back and they kind of show the camps. They, like, show Dachau at one point, and I'm just kind of like, we don't... Like, him being Nazi is already, like, kind of sus. Like, that's a bit much, but okay, it's kind of cartoonish, sure. And then they actually show him, like, in the uniform, and they, like, depict it in a really, like, skin-crawling way, and you're just like, what is this doing in this TV show? One thing I will say, love how he dies. He is incinerated. Because, you know, get it? Irony. I went to film school. And this is where the show just sort of, like, you know, everybody's trying to escape the asylum, they're coming up with plans, and also, we completely neglected to mention that Lily Rabe is being possessed by a demon.
So yes, in this season, we do in fact have aliens,
Nazis, and
a shitty asylum, a demon possession by Satan himself, and Anne Frank.
And
why? Why, Ryan Murphy? I really want to know.
See, this is the thing that gets me, is that, like, I could say that I enjoy this about as much as Murder House, but the thing that keeps Murder House in front of something like this is because even at its most fractured, you still get like an idea of just like the stories that don't really relate to the core of it, or like they're still building the environment. Whereas the Asylum, it's not like a supernatural place. It's
Things
just a place.
just keep
like
happening.
Like the Anne Frank thing. That just happens.
Happens?
There's nothing.
It's one episode.
You
And then they keep the fact that they're still trying to figure out whether or not Arden is a Nazi or not. But other than that, it goes away.
It also doesn't matter just because you see him do all kinds of awful shit. Like, the way you play up the tension here is if you make him like a nice presence that people like and understand or whatever, but he's doing like human experiments on people.
He cuts off Chloe Sevigny's legs so she wouldn't have sex with him.
And it's ooh boy, it is. And he's nice to Lily Rabe because she, like, I think it's just because she's pretty. Like, is that it? I think that's just it.
Because she's pretty and the devil's making her a whore.
Yeah, that's right. And none of these things like mesh together ever. It also like does the weird thing where like Murder House, it like kind of becomes a little bit more about Jessica Lange in the second half. It kind of does that too. Oh.
All this is happening while we're also experiencing Sarah Paulson trying to be broken out of this asylum by Zachary Quinto, the bloody face killer who has insane mommy issues.
That was the one.
And they're trying to fucking castrate Evan Peters and the other girl.
Yeah, that and the girl he falls in love with. It's like they counteracted how much you kind of thought Tate was a slimy little shit in the first season by making Evan Peters the most gosh, all shucks character ever in this one. And it's like, oh, he killed his family, but also he didn't. And the one episode or one segment of this show I ever saw was because I think I watched Justified when it was airing on FX, and I saw the end of one episode. It's the one where Zachary Quinto talks about his backstory, and necrophilia happens. So that was cool. I remembered that. I was just like, oh yeah, I did see that, and I remember being like, I don't want to watch this show.
And then you met me.
And then
I'm
met
sorry.
You. It's okay. Well, it's because Zachary Quinto plays the same character in everything. He has mommy issues and he's a serial killer in everything. In Heroes, it's the same thing. He even has mommy issues in Star Trek. And then he's just like, hey, I have mommy issues, I'm a serial killer. It's like, as soon as he gets Sarah Paulson out of there, if you are not like, he did it, it's like he's just, he's one of the people who, like, does the best, I think, in his role, his respective like part, is he kind of eats the whole cheesy serial killer thing, and it's kind of fun. And we get the first bits of Sarah Paulson doing the Sarah Paulson cry. Oh my god, gang! Oh my god, gang! She cries in every season a lot, and she talks like that, and it's a joke now between the two of us, where she just says, I wanna go gang. That's in Freak Show, I think. But regardless, none of these things really add together. Like, they're really tangential, and the only thing that really got me by the end is I wanted Sarah Paulson to get away from Zachary Quinto because he's gross. And I wanted... I was kind of invested in Jessica Lange's character, who, like, she was faded starlet character who, like, she was like a singer, I think. She was like a lounge jazz singer or something.
Well, she's that character in every season.
Yeah, but not that she's the same character, but that she's the same type of character. And so Jessica Lange is like, wait, is she also, she was also in Germany in this one, right? Like, that's her backstory, is that she was there.
All that I remember.
No, wait,
all that I remember about her.
Freak Show. My bad.
Freak Show.
That's there's
all
there's
that
Nazis. That one too.
All I remember about her backstory in this one is that she is a nun and she hit that one girl with their car and just kind of left.
And then Lily Rabe is like trying to oust her, and she basically does. But like by the end, Jessica Lange is really good at playing like this character who's like fallen from grace, and she's like has a lot of regret and stuff, and it's capitalized on beautifully in Coven. But here it's just she's a really compelling presence, and like her and Sarah, they're trying to get away from the place at the same time, and that's when the show is at its most focused. And then this starts the trend of every season of the show is too long, because like there's a point where it's always that final third there's always, like, you just get to a point and you're just kind of like, this just...
We're kind of like, oh, time for the next season.
And
What do
then
you mean there's 4 more episodes?
Yeah, and
We've
then...
gotten past the resolution. What the fuck are you doing, Ryan Murphy?
There's a point where, like, it does the after thing with Evan Peters and his 2 wives now because they escape, and there's, like, there's a lot there. But it just kind of keeps going, and then the end is like, oh, I mean...
Sarah Paulson becomes an actual journalist because she's exposed to the asylum.
Yeah, that's the coda, is that she has the baby from Zachary Quinto, because, you know, and it's Dylan McDermott, and he's a murderer, and then he goes to, like, kill her, I think, and she shoots him. It's pretty awesome, honestly. It's pretty cool.
It's mine.
Yeah, this is a mess. I mean, it's a hot mess. It's
However,
bad.
one of those final episodes is probably the best shot episode of the first 2 seasons put together.
You remember that? What episode is that?
The one where it's like the final episode with her and Zachary Quinto. And she's broken in to kind of get him back.
Yeah, yes.
You know what I'm talking about now?
The formals occasionally get really interesting now. Like, now that the show has money behind it, camera work, editing, it's a lot solid. It's a lot more... It makes this, like, sitting through the first half eminently watchable. But it's still so long. But... yeah, that's a good... I think that's worth pointing out, is that it's better. Like, this is a mess. It's not good. But I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy a lot of it. Just how messy and
that being said,
bad it is.
We are 1 more season away from you ever hearing us say that we enjoyed the show again. That's a lie. That's not true. Roanoke was pretty good.
Finishing our thoughts on Asylum is that I think really the show's biggest problem is that, or this season specifically, is that it doesn't really have any, like, themes. Like, Murder House had a point to it. It's a story, and you can just be like, oh, ABC, this was about this. Asylum's just a lot of things happening in congruence, and just doesn't ever really have a point to any of it. I think it's supposed to be about how, like journalism and how it like affects like resulting from like the trauma thing, because it does that whole thing where that like last episode is like her going back and like trying to make a story off of all this, and then it doesn't really like say anything about it, and then it's like, oh, I'm your son, and then she just shoots him. It's like, okay, cool, man. It's just over. It's too long, but
It's very long.
It is not the longest feeling season of this show.
No, it's
not by a long shot.
Would
However,
it actually be Freak Show, Hotel, or Cold?
I don't
Roanoke felt longer than Cold.
agree to disagree.
The Roanoke felt longer than Cold.
Yeah.
I mean, Roanoke felt like it took up more time than Colt.
Yeah, and because of Colt's really abrupt ending.
Like,
but,
Colt finally ended. Roanoke just
well, we
kept
can at
going.
least
We'll get there.
Yeah, we can at
Don't
least
worry.
talk about the one season of the show that really, if anything, its problem is the opposite, is that there isn't enough of it, which does kind of get rectified later, but this is the nicest episode we're going to record, and basically we did nothing but say it's like, the first one is a mess, and the second one is bad, but this third one is the one where both of us can unite and say this is the only season of this show so far
That is genuinely
that
good.
feels genuinely good, like a really worthwhile season of TV, and that's Coven.
I genuinely need proof that Ryan Murphy had anything to do with it, because
it doesn't feel like, I mean, like, I can sort of see what, like, when we look at the critical appraisal of this show, is that this is the first season where the ratings on, like, IMDb start to take a bit of a dive, which doesn't make sense to the two of us because we like the season. We think it's, like, the most coherent and the most, like, flowing and, like, has the best characters and the best ideas. But I think it's because precisely is that Ryan strayed too far from the formula of what people like, because it doesn't feel like an episode of American Horror Story or season of, and it's not particularly scary. But then again, none of the seasons really are. I mean, it can be gross, but it's never really scary. This, on the other hand, it does have some scary ideas in it. But Coven is basically. It's the best way to get to my heart is that it's a Southern Gothic witch coven story about these young teenage girls who discover that they're witches, spearheaded mainly by Tessa Farmiga, who comes back, and she finds out that she's a witch because she has the backstory of what's her name from X-Men? Rogue? Is it Rogue? She kills the boy that she's making out with, and she...
Maybe a little more making out. But
yeah, a little bit more. But she then goes to the new... Is it New Orleans?
Yeah, it's New Orleans.
Yeah, it's New Orleans. And already we have a vast improvement over the fact is that
it's Robichaux's Academy for Exceptional Young Girls.
Love that you remember that. But, like, the setting here feels like a setting. Like, it feels like it's in a distinct part of America. It actually does feel Southern Gothic. The big, like, witch mansion thing that they're in is, like, enormous and, like, decorative and cool. And the witch place, Robichaux's Academy, there's also...
we have Nan.
Yeah, okay, we have Nan, who is a returning cast member. She was Adelaide in the first season.
We have Queenie.
Queenie, who's played by another American Horror Story mainstay that I can't remember the name of.
No, she's not a mainstay.
She's in most of the seasons.
No, she's not.
Yeah, she is. She's in Hotel, she's in Apocalypse, she's in...
She's Queenie in every one of those, and she's only been in those 3 seasons.
Oh, well, still, she does come back in multiple seasons.
Emma Roberts is more of a mainstay than she is.
Emma Roberts.
And we have Madison Montgomery played by Emma Roberts. Additionally.
So we have, like, the new sort of, like, witches coming into, like, a witch coven that's basically, like, all but fallen apart. It's basically just Sarah Paulson and Jessica Lange with those girls. It is run
by Jessica Lange, who is at the time the Supreme.
The head witch.
Yeah, she
and
is.
her daughter, Sarah.
Fiona Good, and then Cordelia Fox is played by Sarah Paulson, who is Fiona's daughter, and she is running the academy.
Yes. And those are, like, the new generation of witches. And there's also, like, witch hunters who are in the periphery of the show. There is a rival, like, clan of witches who basically, like, they were, like, you know, it was, like, black voodoo culture that, you know, a bunch of white people came and appropriated and stole, which is a main point of conflict for the show, is that the original sort of, like, voodoo witches kind of, you know, hate the other witches because, you know, it's just white people be white
and mostly
people.
because Fiona is a bitch.
And because Fiona is an awful
in this
woman.
season we actually have, like, Marie Laveau.
Who is, what's her name?
Angela Bassett.
Angela Bassett, who's awesome every time she's in this show.
Yeah. Even when they gave her 3 titties. For no fucking reason.
There is, also, there's another, who plays...
Kathy Bates is here.
Yeah, Kathy Bates shows up, and she's awesome. And who plays Papa Legba? I can't remember.
Shit.
I was really excited when he showed up because I like him a lot.
God, who is? Excuse me.
Okay, so this new generation of witches comes in, and they all kind of have their own little, like... The cool thing about it is basically all of the mechanics and all of the powers that they have. Like, they each have unique individual things they can do. Like, Tessa Farmiga can kill people when she has sex with them. It's an incredibly specific power, but I mean, it's not useless. Queenie has the coolest power.
She is a human voodoo doll.
Yeah. Like, she can't feel... Like, can she feel the pain?
If it's inflicted upon her, I think so.
But when she does something to herself, it happens to someone else. So, like, she can, like, take a kitchen knife and be like, whoosh, and then it'll affect whoever she's focusing on.
Yes.
And it's a really awesome power that gets used in lots of really cool creative ways throughout the season. Like, you know... It's a pretty basic plot element, but it's awesome. And then there's Emma Roberts, who plays, like, a celebrity who...
A washed-up celebrity, yeah.
Who turns out to be a witch, and she's just
her main one is telekinesis, and then you have Nan, who can hear...
Yeah, she, like...
everyone's thoughts, even the dead.
She can, like, sense things about, like, supernatural, like, places and people and all that stuff.
And who doesn't, the witch who does not live at the academy, who is by far the best character of the entire season.
Misty Day, played by Lily Rabe, who is like
Wife.
yes, she's very much like she's introduced dancing to a Fleetwood Mac song, which, of course, very natural. That of course.
Anytime the camera is on, like, her specifically, or the focus is on her, a Fleetwood Mac song is playing.
It's either something from Rumors or literally actually Stevie's solo work, which, again, yes. But basically she shows up and it's just like, oh, her bit is that she's Stevie Nicks, basically, and she, like, literally canonically loves Stevie Nicks because, you know, witch. And she's got a little accent. And Lily Rabe is also just like she's a good actress, and she really plays up the charm of this character really, really well. She's very powerful. She can, like, bring things back to life. And
that's her, like, big thing, is that she can bring anything, including
she's
herself, back to life.
In tune with, like, nature and stuff. She's the swamp witch. But she's really, like, down to earth and cool, and she doesn't like hurting things, but she's also, like, kind of a badass too. Like, she's just really cool. And, like, everybody who meets her thinks she's really cool. Well, not everybody, but some people. And basically,
everyone doesn't feel threatened by her.
The entire conflict of this series is sort of immediately introduced by the fact that Jessica Lange is the Supreme. And the rules of how the Supreme works are that every, like, once in a generation there will be a new witch that will have all of these sets of powers that will lead the Coven. And she is said witch. But when the successor comes along, their powers will start to wane, and then the other powers will start to rise in someone else. And she's getting older, and she's afraid of dying, and now with these new girls who are really powerful witches showing up, one of them is going to manifest as being the Supreme. And Jessica Lange is, like, she's basically, like, she's more or less the kind of, like, villain of this season, kind of, but it's really rooted in the fact that it's just, like, she just doesn't want to die. She's afraid of dying. Becoming the Supreme was, like, a big thing for her too, and there was all this complicated history with her and other witches that might have become the Supreme that you get into. You get the entire story of her life, essentially, and she has to sort of work behind the scenes to make sure that she can kill and guess the girl who's going to supersede her so that she does not die. And so all the witches are doing all these powers and all this stuff, and, you know, you're trying to guess who's the Supreme. Which one of these four girls is it going to be? Is it going to be Misty? Is it going to be these guys? Who knows? Nobody knows.
And for a while, Jessica Lange thinks that it's going to be Emma Roberts.
Yes.
Because Emma Roberts is just her.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the same character that she was when she was younger.
Reminds her of that. And that's another thing that this season gets really well, is the characterization of everyone, is that her immediately thinking that the person who's most like her is going to be the Supreme is, like, her narcissism being her sort of tragic flaw as a character. And it feels like for the first time in this show, everyone sort of is on a set path where they have, like, a really defined character arc, a beginning, middle, and an end that feels satisfying. With one notable exception, we do have one complaint with this season. That said, on the kind of side of things is... we have Evan Peters plays a character who is, like, a varsity jock dude. And
he's a college frat boy.
Yeah, and in the first episode, some college frat boys do some not so nice things to Emma Roberts, and in retaliation, she flips the bus that they're on over, which is pretty based. It's pretty good. And a bunch of them die, including Evan Peters. So you're just like, what's he doing here? Well, he was a kind of good guy who tried to stop everything, and Tessa Farmiga felt really bad about that. So they go to the coroner later, her and Emma Roberts, and then they, like, resurrect him and kind of put him back together.
They piece him together with
Frankenstein.
The episode is titled Boy Parts.
Yeah.
And quite literally.
They put him back together, but they discover that he's not really, like, he has the memories and body of the boy who had that, but he's kind of like a new person. Like, he's sort of, it sort of does, like, a weird, are we human or are we dancer kind of thing, where it's like, is he just kind of a vessel, or, like, kind of a robot, or, like, or does he have those lingering memories? Are the memories, do they make him who he is? Blah, blah, blah. And, like, she tries to send him back to his grieving mother, who turns out to be, grieving for a couple of reasons that are not cool. This season is not free from Ryan Murphy's occasionally way too edgy tendencies, but it's not really front and center. The mom dies anyway because she's boinking Evan Peters' mommy issues. But basically, he becomes a point of contention for Tessa and Emma.
Yeah.
Is that sort of they both, he becomes slowly more and more human-like, and they both sort of kind of develop an attachment to him. And it's kind of implied, at least for me anyway, that Emma Roberts likes him just because he's kind of like a blind sycophant that she'll just because she's pretty, and also he'll be there. But once she's being threatened by Tessa, though, that stands in the way.
See, it's more so because at that point she has been killed and brought back to life.
Yeah.
So she feels the connection with him because he's the only other one there that has also died.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where her biggest connection to him comes into play, is that he can feel the same things that she feels.
Yes. And she's just generally not somebody who feels a lot of emotion. So you really get the sort of contentious relationship that they all have, and they kind of have their own Evan Peters molecule at one point.
Yeah, whereas Tessa and Evan already had that connection before he died. So she still latched on to that.
So that's kind of a cool, interesting subplot. And the other one...
That being said, it's a subplot that happens within the show that still makes sense and still allows the story to keep on fucking going.
It doesn't halt anything or take up too much time. It feels natural within the story. And then the story gets even more cool when it introduces Angela Bassett, because then it's just a fucking witch coven war. And it's that sounds awesome!
But in order to introduce Angela Bassett, they have to introduce Kathy Bates' character, who...
She is the worst.
She is an old fucking racist bitch who has been alive for hundreds of years because Angela Bassett didn't really poison her, but she put a spell on her in which she would just have to live and suffer forever alone.
And she was buried alive.
And she was just buried alive for all these years. And they, Jessica Lange takes the girls to tour her old house. What is her name?
Lala Ree. That's what they keep saying over and over again. That's right.
Delphine, yeah. There we go.
Okay,
so basically, when she was alive, she had all of her kids, and one of them, I believe it was, she had thought that her servant boy, who was a black man, was having relations with one of her daughters.
And so she kills, a bunch of people.
So she kills him, and her thing is that she, much like Jessica Lange, fears dying, fears getting old. So she's collecting their blood and putting this whole spell thing to where she's painting herself with this blood thing that's gonna make her younger.
And her daughters even threaten her in a way, they kind of end up betraying her, and she kills her daughters, and it's Jesus Christ, lady.
Yeah. So one of the men that she had murdered, incidentally happened to be Marie Laveau's lover.
Yeah.
So Marie said, "Haha, fuck you, white bitch," and did away with her. So I'm not sure if it was a point of Jessica Lange that she wanted to bring her back for this reason, or if she had just stumbled upon it. But she took the kids to the old house of Delphine, and while they were there, Nan, the one that can hear everything, dead or alive, hears the voice of the woman of the house. So she tells this to Jessica Lange, so Jessica Lange digs her up, brings her back, and this woman's been underground for hundreds of years, so she has what I like to call her Captain America moment, where she's I don't know what any of this is. What is that talking box? Why is there a black man and they're saying he's the president?
There's one point where Queenie straps her down in a chair and makes her watch Roots. It's so funny. She cries at one point, but then what I like is that doesn't absolve her of her racism. She's still racist and awful afterwards. It's great.
She just doesn't stop being this awful racist, and once Jessica Lange realizes how racist she is, especially because of her hatred for Queenie right off the bat, Jessica Lange goes, "Oh, well, you're no longer our maid. You're her personal slave.
Yeah.
Have fun with that." And Queenie's like, "I'm gonna enjoy this. Cook me up some shit, bitch."
And she spends the entire season basically in servitude to Queenie, which is
awesome.
It's funny. I mean,
it's pretty good.
It's so campy and pulpy, and I can't help but just be that's funny as fuck.
And it's good, too, because her and Queenie still have their moments where they kind of come to, like, not really
It's not
equality,
one note.
but, like, they have a couple moments, like, in which,
the characters relate to each other as human beings.
yeah,
too.
like, at one point when, Marie Laveau sends back the guy to come after her and Queenie saves her.
Yeah.
Like, there's just a whole lot of moments like that where they kind of find some kind of common ground because they are still all kind of working against all these forces together.
And it never really, like, takes one stance. Like, the show never, like, forgives or absolves Lala Marie for any of the bad shit that she does. It's just, it's fully aware that she sucks the whole time. But, you know, it actually, like, does something interesting with her presence, which is the cool thing about all of the side stuff. There's also a side plot about Sarah Paulson's husband, who we don't really know what his deal is that he's just kind of like a guy who seems to be like a normal human who's just kind of going along with all this witch stuff.
Also cheats on his wife while he's off on a business trip.
And then, well, it goes further than that. It's like he cheats on it, and then it's just like he, like, murders the girl that he had sex with, and you're just like, whoa, he's like a murderer, oh my god. And then it goes further, and it's just like, not only is he a murderer, he's a fucking witch hunter, and you're like, what? And then it turns out that he belongs to this entire, like, organization.
Family organization.
Yeah, where his dad is one of the villains of Mr. Robot. One of my fucking favorite TV character actors shows up, and he plays Philip Price in Mr. Robot, and he's so good. And he showed up, and they sort of, like, they try to have, like, a coup once Marie Laveau and fucking, what's her normal Fiona. Sorry. When her and Fiona kind of mend bridges there for a second after there's, like, some really bad bloodshed on both sides, they sort of come together because they're like, we gotta stop these fucking witch hunters because they're gonna come after us both. And they have this meeting with them, and it's like the fucking Michael Corleone scene from the original Godfather, and they just come in, and it's a fucking bloodbath. Everyone
They're
dies.
also aided by the Axeman.
Yeah, and
which is another subplot in this
Danny
story.
Houston is in this show, and he plays the ghost of a serial killer who killed people with an axe. And he's, like, really charming. He's like a jazz band dude, and he and fucking Fiona have this, like, relationship that's, like, really weirdly compelling, and that, like, you kind of get it that at first it's just like Fiona's using him, and then you kind of find out more about him. It's like, oh, he's using her, and then they both kind of end up being on equal footing there at the end, and it's
pretty good.
It's really weird, but, like, really fascinating. And then all this just sort of tumbles, and then Sarah Paulson loses her fucking vision
twice.
She, like, burns her own eyes, and it's really gross.
Well, first they were burnt. The second time, she dug them out so that she could get her sight. Not her sight, but her sight back for the sake of the Coven. It's
Myrtle, who I think has died 3 times over the course of this show.
Maybe
also
4?
Gets, like, framed for stuff. Myrtle's a character who's another witch who's, like, kind of
she's part
in
of the
hierarchy.
council.
Yeah,
yes.
She's in, like, and fucking Beverly Leslie from Will and Grace is another witch who's their warlock, technically, I guess.
Gay man.
Tiny gay man. And she kills, like, the rest of them just because Fiona's a bitch, and it's still pretty based. And then she gets burnt at the stake because she gets framed, and they have this whole feud going on. It's like everything here really feels logical and built off of everything else. It's easily the most coherently plotted season of the show.
It's simultaneously the downfall and the rise of this Coven all at the same time. Because while all this crazy shit is happening, they're working almost overtime to try to figure out which one of these girls is going to be the Supreme.
And that's what the end kind of focuses on.
Yeah, because eventually they bring in Misty, and once Sarah Paulson meets Misty and finds out that she can revive anybody, she's like, oh my god, this is our Supreme. And that brings us to the by far coolest part of the entire season. When Jessica Lange figures out that they think Misty is going to be the Supreme. And then Stevie fucking Nicks is there.
And we don't mean Stevie Nicks shows up in this show as in, like, a performer, or, like, Stevie Nicks as Stevie Nicks.
As a witch.
Shows up and is canonically, in this universe, the White Witch. Like, that is, like, Ryan Murphy was like, Stevie Nicks, please be in my show and be yourself, but also a witch.
This is the only show she has ever acted in.
Misty meets her, and she gets to be a Stevie Nicks fan meeting Stevie Nicks. Did I mention that her name is Rhiannon? And that is, like, again, that is just unfathomably based. Like, this is the only time...
Stevie Nicks sits in the living room of the Coven house and sings Rhiannon at the piano while Misty dances around, and then she gifts Misty a shawl, and it's just this whole thing. And then she comes back for the final episode to sing the Seven Wonders, because the test to find the Supreme is called the Seven Wonders. And also, I went to a concert in Louisville to see Stevie Nicks and the rest of Fleetwood Mac in 2015, I think. Mm-hmm. And she talked about, like, the whole recording of this show and, like, being a part of it. And it was just so much.
It's pretty awesome.
Brain is very loud.
And the only complaint we have, I think, builds off of that, is that when the show moves into the end games, that all the subplots kind of fade away. They're all either resolved or just sort of put on the back burner, like Danny Houston for the very end. And in order to solve this whole, like, who's going to lead the Coven next, they're doing all the things, and it's like all the test. You have to accurately perform the Seven Wonders, and each of the girls is, like, doing them. And in one of the Seven Wonders tests, you have to go to hell and then come back.
You have to die, go to hell, your own that's the thing in this show, that there is no, like, hell. Everyone has their own personal hell, which is... It's exactly as it sounds. So, like, for Queenie, she used to work at a fast food restaurant.
Oh, that one.
So her personal hell is her...
working as, like, a fry cook forever. As
a fry cook, being the only one there and dealing with a line of customers, all white men, for the rest of eternity.
Sucks so bad.
And the thing that we hate the absolute most, can I just say it?
Yeah, just say it.
Misty Day gets sent to her own personal hell. And like we mentioned, she's very in tune with nature and she doesn't like hurting things.
She loves animals.
She loves animals. She loves being good. You know, her whole thing is that she loves the White Witch.
Spiritual.
And that's what she is. She is put back in her high school classroom when she had to dissect a frog.
And she has to keep killing it and resurrecting it.
Because every time she goes to kill it, she can't do it. She puts the knife down and she brings it back to life.
And then the teacher makes her open it with the scalpel, and it's just her killing that frog over and over and over and over again. And it's like, it sounds kind of, like, weird, but, like, once it happens, like, and Lily, like, really sells this as being something that's, like, torture for her. And it's like, seeing this is upsetting enough. But what happens is that Misty fails this trial, and if you fail this specific trial, you are in hell forever.
You die.
And she just crumples into dust. And this isn't me being like, okay, cards on the table. I still would have been upset if they had handled this a little bit better. But the problem with killing her is they do it for no reason.
Yeah.
There is not a single reason as to why they kill Misty or as to why she's not there. Because it's like, if they needed to kill the person who can do resurrections, spoiler alert, Sarah Paulson can still do them.
And so can Madison Montgomery. So can Emma Roberts.
And it's just a little infuriating. It's just, it feels really needlessly cruel for no reason.
Until they stop there because they kind of get freaked out and Madison fails the next one. Mm-hmm. Because they really thought at that point that it was going to be Madison. And another thing is that while they're performing all these Seven Wonders, the girls keep dying. Mm-hmm. And we also failed to mention is that at one point, Jessica Lange thought that Nan was going to be the Supreme.
Kills her.
So it wasn't even she was going to be the Supreme. Marie Laveau has a deal with Papa Legba.
Yeah.
And that is, she has to give him...
Papa Legba's like a demon spirit dude, by the way.
Like he is the malevolent god thing for the voodoo witches. Mm-hmm. She has to give him... Because her deal with him is that in order for her to be immortal is that she has to gift him a innocent soul once a year, which typically means she breaks into a hospital, steals a baby, and kills it and gives it to him.
It's really fucked up.
It's really fucked up. It's also, like, really cool just to see fucking Angela Bassett rob a hospital.
Cradle rob, and then just be like, here's your fucking baby.
But so they kill Nan as their innocent life because not only...
Lance Reddick, that's who plays Papa Legba. Sorry.
Not only does Jessica Lange want to make her own deal with Papa Legba so that she can be immortal because, again, she's afraid of dying, the new Supreme is coming. This is their deal to work together is that they're going to sacrifice this one witch so that they can both get what they want.
Yeah, basically.
So Nan is gone. She's not here. She's not participating in the Seven Wonders, even though she very well could have a strong chance.
And I have to say, too, is that the actress that plays Nan and Addie and all this, it's just like, one thing Ryan Murphy has sort of prides himself on, again, is the idea of representation, and that goes far beyond just, women, people of color, trans characters, like that was a big thing with Glee, is that, Addie has Down syndrome, and she is one of the best actresses to show up in this show, and I think that's in American Horror Story, it's a big kind of property, so I gotta applaud him for, putting and giving big roles to characters like that, because that's not often afforded to actors who are anything less than, like, godlike super beings, like Emma Roberts and shit, and I appreciate it, is all I'm saying. You don't always get to see the representation of shit like that, and let alone good representation. So, it sucks that she dies.
However,
but she gets...
beyond that, just like all the gay people, she dies in every season that she's into.
Ryan Murphy
Ryan
is
Murphy,
gay.
the electric chair.
Ryan Murphy is gay, but also just like a lot of his stuff is so like subtextually homophobic. Not this though, thankfully.
But anyway, as the rest of the Seven Wonders go on, the girls keep just dying as they're trying to perform these.
Failing.
Yeah, one of which happens when they're doing was it transmutation?
Yeah, and she like
they end up just playing. The whole thing is they just need to like transport from one place to another, and the girls make a game out of it because they're tired. They've been doing this for a while. They're losing people left and right. They just need some fun. So they kind of start playing tag around the entire house, outside of the house.
One fucking apparates into the fucking spiked gate. It's some really fucked up body horror shit. It's nasty.
It's rough. But the whole thing is that they, at this point, they truly think that it's going to be Madison. So Sarah Paulson is like, okay, I need you to bring back Zoe, and I need you to bring back Misty. Not only because we need you to prove that you're supreme, but we can't just let them die.
Yeah.
Because they're a dying coven and they need this.
Yeah.
And she won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that it's because she can't.
Yeah.
So then they're stuck in this place of, well, then who's the fucking supreme?
And Sarah Paulson. It's like...
To which Myrtle goes, I don't know why I didn't realize it sooner. And then they have Sarah Paulson, the daughter of the current supreme, perform all the Seven Wonders. And lo and behold, she's the supreme. So all these girls died for nothing.
Which, sucks. But that said, the really most satisfying part of Coven is not the ending, but right before the ending, where everyone sort of ties everything together, and Fiona ends up getting her just desserts in a really satisfying way, in that she ends up getting stuck in her own personal hell, which is this life of plaintive domesticity with the Danny Houston character, but she basically relives the same exact normal day over and over again with this character.
It's like evil 52 First Dates.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Where Adam Sandler is an axe murderer, and she gets stuck in that, and it's like she really gets her comeuppance for all of the bad shit that she's done. Which is, again, it's like, Jessica Lange's characters in this are pretty consistently given the fate that they deserve, or at least they are written to have in an interesting way. And it's like, that's really satisfying to see as an audience member. And what happens after that is that they open the Coven and go public with it. They're just like, hey, world, we're a bunch of witches, we're real. They have like a press conference and they like report it on CNN. Oh no. It died. Son of a bitch, it died. Okay, so our camera's being a little shit, and we honestly, like, this was a last minute recording that we had to do, so...
you can just insert a bunch of pretty pictures of Misty Day here or something, I don't know.
Perfect. I'm just going to put in Misty dancing to, like, Rhiannon.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about is, they go public on, like, CNN and stuff, and it's... like, they demonstrate their power so that everybody knows that they're legit, and then it ends with a new school of them becoming basically like Witch School Hogwarts, like a bunch of gifted children, Xavier's School for Gifted Children. They show up, and, the girls are now like teachers' assistants, basically, the surviving girls, that is, and and Sarah Paulson is the Coven leader, and they get to welcome everyone there, and it ends up being like, oh wow, I got to see this failing Coven at the very beginning finally become thriving, and Fiona is gone, and they've cast aside all that stuff, and it's a really full, complete story, and the problem is that it ends there, and you're like, but wait.
But wait, everything else lasted for 10 years. Why can't we have more?
Yeah, you get like a snapshot of this, and all of the other characters, it's like, I wanted more from stuff like Evan Peters and Tessa Farmiga, and then that's like stops, and I'm like, but wait, what did they do after that? And like, there's like, it's not necessarily that there's a bunch of loose threads, it's just things that you want to see go further, things that would be great for a second season of a show would be dope. And then it's just over.
It has been so many years, and not a day has gone past where I haven't been upset over the fact that this season particularly didn't get a spin-off show, because then it's proven in season 8 that it very well could have gotten its own spin-off show.
For those not in the know, is that eventually, this is kind of like the MCU, or, well, I mean, really the point of comparison is Stephen King, because Stephen King's books are all in the same universe, right? Is that all of American Horror Story happens in the same universe, and they do interesting little ties into different things, and some actors play different characters, blah, 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 blah. But later, we see the characters from Coven again. And
we also see a particular character from Murder House.
Some stuff. Well, the thing is that we'll review that when we review that. But the thing is that it creates some of the most compelling television that this program has ever yielded. So the problem really being is that this just does not feel like American Horror Story, and it shouldn't be. It should just be its own thing. Again, it doesn't feel in keeping with anything else. It doesn't have the same tone. It isn't like as
until Hotel happens, until we got to that episode of Hotel in which Queenie shows up, I was genuinely convinced that it was going to be the only season that wasn't connected to every other season. Because every other season you can kind of make sense, or they pointed to in some way to make it make sense.
Yeah.
But it just feels so far removed that I was like, there's no way they're ever going to bring it back. Like, there's no...
And then, like, all of the ties back to this season are unequivocally the best parts of whenever they show up. So it bothers me that it's just like, did they write this because, like, was there, like, less good reception to the second season and they needed to bounce back with something, and they just completely did, like, oh, let's do a Witch Coven thing. And then, because, I mean, spoiler alert, but Cult was the worst reviewed season of this show, and I think that Ryan Murphy brought back American Horror Story Coven characters because they were the characters that endured the longest, and that people liked the most, generally speaking, and Murder House, but, you know, again, cross that bridge when we come to it. But it feels so out of step with the rest of this, is that its biggest problem is that it is, in fact, a season of this show. Like, it just needs to be its own thing, and and it probably needs to be written by women, you know? Like,
but the thing is that it's the season with the most women credited writers.
Which, I mean, again, it really fucking shows.
Yeah, because all these women characters have depth, and each one of them, like,
feels
like a person.
They're not just there to be like, oh, I am a character. Like, they're not just there to be the token girl boss that Ryan Murphy really, really likes. But point is that it is a compelling season of TV. If I had to give... Did we even give Asylum ratings?
We didn't give Asylum a rating.
I'd give Asylum a 4. Yeah, it's worse than Murder House, but I can't quite say it's a nadir just because it's entertainingly schlocky in parts. What would you give it?
I'd give it 3 Anne Franks out of 10.
God.
No, but really, I give it a 3 out of 10. Like, I hate that season.
Yeah, fair enough.
It would, if we wouldn't have watched more, it would get a 1. But I know that
See,
Hotel
it's funny
exists,
because we
and
watched
I know
more.
that Cult exists.
Because we watched more, I think I gave it a higher score.
Yeah, so like, one really cool thing is that after we finished Hotel, me and Jake sat apart from each other and we ranked them all.
Yeah, every season.
Which
we're going to do at the end of
in our own personal order. And then we read them to each other and we ranked them the exact same way. So,
and Coven, in our opinion, is the best season of the show,
Which,
unsurprisingly.
for me, unless they actually, not this season 8, but unless they ever bring back Coven, it is not going to change.
No, I would give Coven overall, like, as a solid season of TV, I'd give that like a 7.5 out of 10. Like, it's just a good season of TV. How many Stevie Nicks out of 10? Rhiannon is thinking.
Here's my thing. If Misty wouldn't have died, it would be a 9. However, Stevie Nicks is there twice.
Yeah, that's true.
And she sings both times. And she is a witch. And also the freak with the dolls dies. So I'm gonna give it. Give it an 8.5.
Okay, all right.
Because it's the introduction of Angela Bassett into the show,
Fair
as
enough.
well as Kathy Bates, and this season holds a very special place in my heart.
So I think overall for these 3 seasons is that this is not an uncommon phenomenon for a show to have maybe a rocky start, but have like a beloved first season, a rough second season, or like a sort of comeback third season or something. But like the entire reason we wanted to do this really was to just chart the trajectory of this, and this is the easiest 3-season long cluster to talk about because Murder House is like the most sort of like in its own stratosphere. And then Asylum is just such a hot fucking mess that it's just kind of easy to laugh at, and Coven's just good. Why you should pay attention to when we're going to do all the other seasons, why you should pay attention is that this 3-season long cluster is the best this show gets. And it takes a steep dive pretty quickly.
There is later a season that there's going to be 2 seasons that are better than Asylum.
Yes.
But
it's not all horrible.
It's not all horrible, but it's not all good.
It is mostly horrible.
Yeah, so next up we have Freak Show, which is exactly what you think it is.
It's Freak Show,
Hotel,
and Roanoke.
Roanoke. Out of those 3, Roanoke is the best.
We can get to that.
We'll get there.
Later.
We'll get there. But be prepared because the next one's gonna be rough. Especially because neither one of us knows what happened in Freak Show or Hotel because it's that fucking bad.
We say that because it's like, it's not that we don't know what happened. It's just that once this show hits a certain point, we talked about how each season's too long, and Coven's problem is that it's too short. So the only season that's really been accentuated by this yet is Asylum, and even then, it's not the worst offender of this. But once you get to Freak Show, there's a point where the show feels like it never fucking ends.
It feels like a season of Supernatural in which it has like 24 fucking episodes.
Except Supernatural occasionally will have, some good episodes thrown in there.
Fuck you. Supernatural has lots of good episodes.
I'm not. Hey. I've seen the first 3 seasons of Supernatural and think it's good.
Cries in STL.
I was gonna say
Cries in Super Mega Hell.
not Super Hell. Save Misty. But look forward to us talking about 2 of the worst seasons of TV ever that are still not the worst season of the show. Woof.
My, oh my.
Jail.
Ryan Murphy, the electric chair. Tell us down below how you would murder Ryan Murphy.
Tell us down below if you are a fan or if you do watch them. What do you think about the seasons we talked about? And are you interested to see us talk about it more just because this has been something we've thought about doing for a very long time now? And I don't know, I don't really know what the cultural evaluation is of this yet, just because everyone, when I remember people watching this show, it was my classmates in high school. It was mostly girls who watched this show. And because I had mostly friends who were girls, because, I was fucking me. And the purveying sentiment seemed to be that Murder House was the good season, that everything else was, bad. Where do you even stand? Or if you haven't even seen the show and just want to hear us ramble about how fucking bad and insane everything gets, are you even enticed to watch the parts that we say are good? Because I know, like, Riley is probably going to listen to this and has never seen an episode of the show.
Riley's gonna. Anyone that listens to this that is friends with you is gonna ask why you're dating me. Why you've put up with me long enough to watch this show.
They can kiss the lily whitest part of my ass. I date you because I love you and you're fun and you're cool.
Oh my god, you guys hear that?
And I like watching shit with you because it's fun. Like, that is the one thing that I think has kept us afloat, is that we are mostly able to have fun with how bad this show is, with the exception of one season, which I think we were just kind of miserable from the outset.
There's not enough wine in the world to make us enjoy Cult.
Yeah, no, that'll be... Oh boy. Yeah.
Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Alright. Well, I think we'll end it off there.
Alright.